You won't believe what happened when I showed up at my own lake cabin and got met with flashing lights. A clipboard-wielding HOA Karen and 2 patrol cars blocking my driveway. All because of a so-called violation involving a lawn chair, a grill, and a flag. That's literally what she claimed. But what she didn't know was that I wasn't just there for a relaxing weekend by the water. I was meeting someone very important, someone who could actually do something about her non-stop harassment. The Attorney General himself. Now before we get into what happened when they finally crossed paths, let me back up a bit. This cabin has been in my family for over 20 years. It's peaceful, quiet, and was supposed to be my escape from the madness of city life. But ever since a new HOA board took over last fall, led by this one woman who somehow thinks she owns the entire lake, everything's changed. Her name's Linda, but around here, folks just call her Karen. She documents everything, knocks on doors uninvited, and even flies a drone over people's yards just to make sure everyone's compliant. I wish I was joking. Last week, I arrived at the cabin for what was supposed to be a private meeting about land use policies and some shady permit practices affecting lakefront properties. But within minutes of pulling up, Karen spotted me, stormed over like I was trespassing on my own land, and then, no warning, no conversation, picked up her phone and dialed 911. She told the cops there was an unauthorized gathering and a possible safety concern. You can imagine their faces when they saw who I was meeting with. But trust me, what happened next? That's the part you really won't want to miss. The officers stepped out of their cruisers, looking a bit confused, probably expecting a wild party or some dangerous situation. Instead, they saw me, standing calmly next to a couple of lawn chairs and a cooler, with the Attorney General's black SUV parked just behind my truck. Karen was already mid-rant, pointing at my porch and waving a folded copy of the HOA rules in the air like it was the U.S. Constitution. She kept shouting about unregistered guests, unauthorized signage, which, by the way, was just a faded welcome flag my mom hung years ago, and something about smoke from my grill being a health hazard. The cops walked over, clearly trying to keep a straight face, while Karen started demanding citations and said she had photographic evidence. I could see the Attorney General still sitting in the SUV, just watching, probably wondering what kind of circus he'd stepped into. The thing is, this wasn't the first time Karen had caused trouble. She's reported my cousin for parking too close to the road. She called the county over someone's hammock. She even once complained that kids playing with chalk were defacing HOA property. It's like she's made it her personal mission to control every inch of the lake community, even though she only bought her cabin 2 years ago and barely lives there full-time. But this time was different. This time, I had someone powerful with me, someone who was there to talk about property rights, misuse of HOA power, and the growing list of complaints filed by other homeowners. Karen had no idea. She thought she was just shutting me down, like usual. What she didn't realize was that her own behavior was about to become the center of a very different kind of meeting as the officers tried to calm Karen down. I stayed quiet, letting her dig herself deeper. She waved her phone around, claiming she had video proof that I was hosting a political event without HOA clearance, which was wild considering it was just me and one guest, and we were sitting outside, sipping iced tea, surrounded by peace and pine trees. She didn't even realize who that guest was yet. She just saw someone in a suit and assumed the worst. That's how Karen operates, assumptions first. Facts never. The Attorney General finally stepped out of the SUV, holding a leather folder and looking about as patient as someone could be when being screamed at for trespassing on HOA land. One of the officers recognized him right away. You could see the mood shift instantly, except with Karen, of course. She was too busy pulling up pictures on her phone and accusing me of using my cabin as a public venue and allowing unauthorized vehicles. referring to the black SUV with government plates. It was surreal. Meanwhile, neighbors started peeking out from their cabins. Some came over, pretending to walk their dogs just to get a closer look. One guy, Tom, whispered to me, "She's done this to half the block. Maybe this time she's gone too far." That's when I realized how deep this conflict really went. It wasn't just about me and my cabin. Karen had been harassing multiple residents using the HOA as her personal weapon. Some folks were afraid to speak up, worried she'd retaliate with fines or complaints. Others had tried going to the board but were met with silence or excuses. Inside, I was boiling not just because of today's nonsense, but because of the pattern. The misuse of HOA power, the intimidation, the way she twisted the rules depending on who she liked. And here I was, with the one person who might actually be able to do something about it. But I had no idea how far Karen was willing to go, or what she'd try next. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. Karen's voice kept rising, each word sharper than the last, as she insisted that I was violating every rule in the book. The officers looked back and forth between us, clearly caught in the middle of something far bigger than a simple HOA complaint. I glanced toward the Attorney General, who had pulled out his phone, likely ready to make some calls or review documents I'd sent ahead. But even his calm presence wasn't enough to quiet Karen's relentless accusations. Suddenly, Karen whipped out a printout, a notice she said was an official HOA violation, issued just that morning. It claimed that my cabin had unauthorized exterior modifications. Something about landscaping and even the placement of my dock. I had seen these so-called notices before, vague, confusing, and always timed perfectly to intimidate. But this one felt different, more aggressive. Like a last warning before things would escalate beyond HOA meetings and polite neighborhood talks dot around us. Whispers spread among the neighbors. A few stepped forward, their faces a mix of worry and frustration. One older woman said quietly, "If she's coming after you this hard, no one is safe." Another neighbor, a young dad with 2 kids, looked torn, as if deciding whether to join the growing chorus of complaints or stay silent and keep his peace. The community was cracking, and Karen was driving the wedge deeper. I felt my phone buzz. A message from my attorney saying the state's investigation into HOA abuses was gaining traction. This was no longer just a local squabble. It was about to become a legal battle that could change everything. Karen noticed the message, her eyes narrowing as if realizing her usual tactics might finally backfire. But she wasn't done yet. In fact, her next move would shock everyone there and push this conflict to a boiling point. Just when I thought Karen couldn't get any more aggressive, she pulled out her final card, something no one saw coming, with a voice dripping. In authority, she announced that she'd filed a formal complaint not just with the HOA board, but with the county zoning office as well. She claimed my cabin's dock violated environmental regulations and that I was risking fines and even forced removal. The neighbors gasped, exchanging uneasy glances. This wasn't just about petty HOA rules anymore. It had just escalated into a full-blown legal threat from a government agency. The Attorney General stepped forward, his expression hardening. "Miss Karen," he said firmly, "have you provided any evidence to support these allegations? Because if not, these claims could be considered harassment." That moment felt like the whole crowd was holding its breath. Karen, caught off guard for a split second, quickly masked it with a smirk and insisted she had all the paperwork and witness testimonies lined up. But then something else happened that changed everything. One of the neighbors, a quiet man named Eric, who'd been standing by the edge, spoke up. "I've lived here for years," he said, voice shaking slightly. Karen's complaints started right after she lost a lawsuit against the previous HOA board, the one where she tried to take over as president. She's been targeting anyone who disagrees with her since his words hit like a bombshell. Suddenly, Karen wasn't just some overzealous neighbor. She was a power player with a personal vendetta. The officers exchanged glances, and the Attorney General nodded slowly, his mind clearly racing through the new information. The stakes had just skyrocketed. What started as a fight over a simple cabin violation had turned into a tangled web of personal grudges, legal battles, and community unrest. And just as the tension reached its peak, Karen made a move that left everyone stunned. But that's a story for the next part. The moment the neighbor, Eric, revealed Karen's hidden motives, the entire atmosphere shifted. The officers straightened, the Attorney General's eyes narrowed, and Karen's confident smirk faltered for the first time. It was clear her carefully constructed facade was starting to crumble. But instead of backing down, Karen doubled down, pulling out a thick folder and slamming it onto the hood of a patrol car. "I have documents, signed affidavits, and photos," she declared, proving the violations are real and intentional. The Attorney General calmly opened the folder and flipped through the papers. Slowly, a smile crept across his face, but it wasn't the kind of smile Karen expected. "Interesting," he said. "These documents appeared doctored, and some of these photos are clearly dated after the supposed violations were corrected." He looked up, locking eyes with Karen. "Attempting to fabricate evidence to push your personal agenda is not only unethical, it's illegal." Karen's face turned pale. The officers exchanged looks, and one quietly radioed for backup. The neighbors murmured among themselves, the tension breaking into whispers of relief. The Attorney General turned to me and said, "This ends today. We'll be launching a full investigation into these practices, and I will personally ensure that abuses of power like this do not go unchecked." I felt a mix of exhaustion and hope. Finally, the nightmare was turning around. But just as we began to believe the worst was behind us, Karen reached into her bag and pulled out a phone, her fingers trembling. She pressed a button, and the screen lit up with a live video feed streaming directly from the drone she'd flown over the lake. "You think this is over?" she hissed. "I have enough footage to bring down every single one of you." The neighbors froze, the officers stiffened, and the Attorney General's jaw tightened. It was clear this fight wasn't over, not by a long shot. But now, with the truth starting to come out, the whole community was watching. And whatever Karen's next move was, we'd be ready. After Karen threatened with her drone footage, the Attorney General calmly stepped forward and said, "Using surveillance to intimidate neighbors crosses legal boundaries. We will review everything carefully." That moment marked a turning point. The officers finally moved in, not to arrest anyone, but to make it clear that harassment and abuse of HOA power wouldn't be tolerated. Karen's usual bravado crumbled as she realized the community and the law were no longer on her side. Over the next few weeks, an official investigation was launched into the HOA's practices. The Attorney General worked closely with local residents to review complaints and ensure fair treatment for everyone. Slowly, the neighborhood began to heal. Neighbors who once stayed silent started speaking up, sharing their stories and standing united against unreasonable rules and threats. Karen's influence faded as the board was restructured to be more transparent and accountable. For me, it was a lesson in standing firm and speaking truth to power. It wasn't just about a violation at my lake cabin. It was about protecting a community and preserving a place where people could enjoy their homes without fear of constant policing. It showed how important it is to know your rights and seek support when faced with unfair treatment. Looking back, it's wild how one person's obsession with control nearly tore everything apart. But in the end, the strength of the community and the right kind of help made all the difference. If you ever find yourself dealing with a HOA Karen or similar harassment, remember, you're not alone. And sometimes, the best way forward is standing together and pushing back with the law on your side. Thanks for sticking with me through this story. Stay tuned because the fight for fair neighborhoods is far from over, and there's always more to learn.